A while back, I talked about how a good number of people online were getting duped by satirical content, unable to tell the difference from what was real and what was someone taking the piss out of a trend or institutions and systems. There were people who genuinely believed that Enron was back, for example, making in-home nuclear reactor eggs. In reality, the creators of Birds Aren't Real had bought the rights to the Enron brand as an elaborate joke. While it seems that nothing much has changed in that arena, I've noticed something else regarding the use of satire lately. It's not that people are so media illiterate or just regular illiterate, although that certainly is a factor. It's that culture and society is currently moving so quickly toward an absurd future that satire has become an almost ineffective tool for critique, particularly in movies and TV. Spoilers for The Studio and Black Mirror. There is no timestamp for you to jump to. It's just maybe don't watch this if you haven't seen those or care to watch them. I don't believe satire is less effective because it's gotten worse or less pointed. If anything, it's the opposite, and it's arguably better than it's ever been. Over the last couple of months, we've been treated to some truly great satirical television. Severance and White Lotus are good examples, and while neither are overt, they're not without their underlying satirical takes on things like labor power in the workplace and personal identity under capitalism. It's hard to say if those themes were consciously made by the creators or whether they just had the high concept idea of what if you could literally compartmentalize your job by remote controlled lobotomy, and what happens to a group of rich people when they go on a vacation they don't want to be on, and stumbled into the larger themes later. Their use of satire is admittedly more subtle and used less for comedic effect and more to just punch up the plot, but there are funny satirical moments. It's just that they're more dramas or tragicomedies than exaggerated comedic satires. As for actual outright satire, we've got The Studio with Seth Rogen, who plays a bumbling new studio head trying to find a balance between art and commerce that employs a lot of satire to comedic effect, critiquing Hollywood and the studio system at large. And while it's not on the same level of something like Severance, it's still pretty good. Plus, having a comedy in what feels like a sea of heavy dramas is refreshing, especially a comedy that at least has a point of view. The main critique the show makes is that movies are being churned out of what are essentially content factories for the sake of creating a commercial hit rather than for the sake of artistic expression. Whether that's getting the director of Smile to do a cynical remake of the exact same movie because it's safer than trying something new, or being forced to make a movie about Kool-Aid just because the studio owns the rights to the IP and have to have their own Barbie-style blockbuster. The first episode deals with the latter scenario and addresses why Kool-Aid isn't and will never be Barbie, and how certain IP has the potential to be box office poison, especially if you try to combine a Scorsese movie about Jonestown with a colorful sugar drink whose mascot's catchphrase is, "Oh yeah!" Was that too Macho Man Randy Savage? It was a fun concept for about 2 weeks until Variety published an exclusive about how there's gonna be a Hershey's chocolate movie next year. Even early reviews pointed out that while the episode of The Studio was funny, it felt too real to be entirely comedic. Satire works because it offers an almost reductio ad absurdum situation, taking an idea to its almost ridiculous conclusion that couldn't possibly come to fruition, or at least shouldn't ever come to fruition. It takes reality just 1 or 2 notches beyond the believable, exaggerating it to highlight the corrosion of whatever the subject is. When a similar real-world event occurs and is in literal pre-production, the joke about how ridiculous a Kool-Aid movie getting made would be ends up lacking any punch and is no longer thought-provoking or as funny as it should be. What was once a joke is now the death rattle of creativity. It takes the wind out of the sails of the point being made about creating content for the sake of IP ownership, where the Barbie movie had inherent themes it could draw out and deconstruct on a deeper level, like misogyny and sexism and the commodification of women's bodies. What themes or stories are worthy of addressing in a Hershey's chocolate or fictional Kool-Aid movie? That's the joke. There aren't any! Unless they plan to make the Hershey movie an indictment on child slave labor being used to harvest their cacao, but I'm fairly certain they probably want a PG rating. And look, I'm not saying every movie based on an IP is a Technicolor war crime. Barbie worked, the Lego movie worked, that Tetris movie kinda worked, I think. There's always a way to take a branded idea and do something unexpected or self-aware. But those movies succeeded because the creative team had something to say and actually cared. Unfortunately, that's the exception and not the rule. What we're seeing now is an entire development pipeline built around the assumption that brand recognition is more important than storytelling. It's not that a Hershey's movie can't be good. It's the likelihood that no one in the boardroom making decisions gives a shit about art. There's a part of me that feels like this was inevitable, and as much as I'm disappointed with where we're at in terms of the entertainment slop that's being pumped out, we honestly should have seen the Marvel-esque slate of movies from the Mars Corporation coming the moment Hasbro made a Battleship movie. And do I really need to ask, who is this for? It's either gonna be a by-the-numbers kids movie with an anthropomorphized chocolate bar protagonist who has to find his place in the world where there's a Hershey's Kiss that's the love interest, or another pointless biopic about the creation of perforated chocolate bars in the vein of the Hot Cheeto movie, or the Pop-Tart movie, or the Pinball movie, or the McDonald's movie, or that one self-serious movie about the maker of a mop. I understand diversification, but who wants a story about a mop? The thing about satire is that there's sometimes a narrow time frame for it to stick the landing and be a prescient piece of art. But that window used to be a few years, and now it's barely a few months or even weeks. It's a structural failure in how fast capitalism moves to commodify trends and ideas and foodstuffs, and how media has to outpace its own critiques. I swear to God, it feels like an intern saw Seth Rogen pitching a Kool-Aid movie in the studio to Scorsese, and without a shred of self-awareness took that idea to his boss the next day, which is how we end up with our Hershey movie 2 weeks later. If a satirical piece of media comes out too late, the joke or critique doesn't have time to really hit, and is overshadowed by a real-life counterpart. It's DOA when the very thing it's trying to critique or draw awareness to becomes a reality. On the flip side, if it's too early, people might see it as an absurd, grating, pretentious fantasy of lowball dumb commentary about something that definitely won't ever happen. Take Idiocracy, for example. 20 years ago, it saturated 2000's vision of the future where a pro wrestler as president seemed crass and obnoxious at the time. Despite the extremely mixed reviews where Entertainment Weekly gave it a D and the AV Club gave it an A-, it has gained a cult following and is, sadly, more relevant now than upon its release. I remember my 19-year-old self thinking how stupid a premise this was, that people would be so dumb that they'd water their crops with a Gatorade facsimile in the future. And to be fair, it wasn't just the premise and speculative fluorescent future that prevented me from suspending my disbelief, but its style and tone. I've never really been a big fan of Mike Judge's sensibilities, and his writing always kind of struck me as that cringy kind of 90s, 2000s era lowbrow comedy where funny equaled repetitive annoying noises. Looking back, it's kind of wild because I was his exact demographic, an angsty white male between the ages of 18 and 24. As I got older, his work did grow on me, and I have come to appreciate Idiocracy and some of his other work, and it's not as bad as I initially thought. Listen, we all make mistakes, and I have to own up to my own short-sightedness and just hope that you can all forgive me for my ignorance. I'm sorry. Despite the 2 decades it took for Idiocracy's prophetic satire to really land, sometimes it doesn't need to take that long. Sometimes all it takes is 4 years. This cycle repeated with Adam McKay's Don't Look Up, where audiences were split about its use of satire, and since its release has also become a cult hit, similar to Idiocracy. I wasn't a fan of Don't Look Up either when it came out, but enjoyed McKay's previous satirical movies like The Big Short and Vice, which never felt like they were going overboard on the goofiness the way that Don't Look Up did. There's perhaps also something to be said about his past movies being based on real events. that might help them ground them as well. Some people ended up praising it for its urgency and climate metaphor, while others thought it was smug and heavy-handed, calling it a, quote, nuance-killing satire of climate change agnosticism, and that it too often uses satire as a tool of castigation rather than as a means of truly taking on the status quo. I understand who was being satirized and to what end, but their performances felt so big and broad that the message fell flat or was undermining the seriousness of the subject matter. But again, since the 2024 election, it, along with Idiocracy, have become ever more relevant today. My issue with Don't Look Up was twofold: the characterization, and that even just 4 years ago, it felt preposterous to think people would be in such deep denial about an extinction-level asteroid plummeting to Earth. Maybe threefold, because I had also gotten used to a certain kind of satire and had different expectations for it. And thinking about it now, the denial Don't Look Up was commenting on is the same denial I felt about a future where such delusional cope was at all remotely possible. Turns out I was also one of the people McKay was satirizing. I am a bit disappointed it took me this long, but I'm not alone in thinking that these past satirical works missed the mark or were foolish in their speculation upon their release. I think many people who disliked them were still hopeful that reality wouldn't imitate art, that it wasn't a foregone conclusion. But we're finding out very quickly that it is, except instead of being a silly romp where average IQ Joe Schmo is a genius who saves the country from the illiterate, it's a harrowing onslaught of uncool, embarrassing Nazis, fumbling authoritarianism due to their ineptitude, but who are still, doing concentration camps and disappearing brown people. So reality is still much, much darker by comparison, which I guess is the one thing Idiocracy and Don't Look Up did get wrong. And to anyone who says, well, satire was never meant to change anything or be a political tool, that sounds a lot like the tired argument that art isn't political. All art is political because people make it, and people don't exist in a vacuum. Satire doesn't have to fix anything to be political because it already is, because the conditions under which art are made are political. Even the most neutral, apolitical art is still making a political statement about the world it exists in. The creator is, whether they like it or not, influenced by the politics around them, by the systems that dictate how they can or can't live, no matter how much they want to refuse to believe it. Satire criticizes policy-adjacent aspects of society and culture, for Christ's sake. How is it not political? Now, it might not be a solution in and of itself, but it absolutely is a tool to get the ball rolling, or at the very least, a canary in the coal mine warning us about a possible future. It's always been used to punch up at systems of power, which is political. My point isn't even that 21st century satire is falling flat because of silly caricatures and broad social commentary, or that the art that life is imitating is less dogs playing poker and more Saturn devouring his son. It's that satire feels less effective because of the exponentially truncated time between the artistic commentary and the thing being commented on existing. Under normal circumstances, we'd have a few years to contemplate these dystopian thought experiments, but because a week after their release, they become a reality, we watch and go, yeah, that checks out. Yeah, that'll do it.
I'd say that does the trick. That'll do it.
Or because we've already been living in the dystopia. The first episode of the newest season of Black Mirror tells the story of a couple who are struggling to have kids when the wife, played by Rashida Jones, has to have part of her brain removed due to an inoperable tumor. But don't worry, technology has advanced so much that it can simply be replaced with a synthetic version of the same piece of brain matter, sans tumor. Unfortunately, in order for it to function, her husband, played by Chris O'Dowd, has to then sign up for a subscription service, effectively turning her head into a cell phone antenna. It's the read the fine print trope where the characters agree to something without fully understanding what they've signed up for, and then things spiral out of control from there. Over the course of the episode, it's revealed that their plan has a limited network, allows the company, called Rivermind, to hijack her body to bleat out daily mid-roll ad breaks, and also use her brain as a decentralized server that processes streaming requests of other users, which then affects her ability to sleep by putting her in sleep mode instead. The only way she can have increased coverage, eliminate the ad reads, and get an actual good night's sleep is to upgrade the plan by several $100s a month that they don't have. Do you see where I'm going with this? It is still an upsetting look into a possible future where our brains are used to prop up corporations and turn people into walking billboards, but I gotta be honest, this isn't all that different from our current reality of everything being run on a fucking subscription model. Just replace synthetic cloud-based brain matter with an Adobe subscription, or iCloud service, or a Netflix account. Which, by the way, is doubly ironic considering Black Mirror is a Netflix exclusive. It's basically the same thing, and honestly, I don't think any of us would be surprised if in 10 to 20 years it became part of Neuralink's business model. Except instead of ads, it's just Elon's tweets asking random women if they can bear his children beamed directly into your temporal occipital cortex. Just smother me to death with a pillow. We're already living in subscription hell and have been for a while. And look, I get some subscription services were inevitable and even logical considering we're talking about essentially transferring data via internet connection that eliminates the need for millions of CDs and DVDs. But capitalism insists upon itself to be ever more profitable, where there is this self-justifying momentum behind every innovation. Hell, there are subscription services to track your subscription services and printers that won't work unless you sign up for a monthly payment plan just so you can use the fucking thing maybe once a month to print a shipping label, or what else do people print? The newest addition to the pointless, potentially dangerous subscription service industrial complex is cars. While you don't have to pay a monthly fee for headlights or braking yet, more and more car companies are doing their best to make driving even worse, which is really saying something considering they've replaced knobs and dials and switches with flat, featureless LCD panels that force you to take your eyes off the road just to lower the AC. Why not force you to pay a monthly premium for roadside assistance when you inevitably wrap your Toyota Corolla around a tree because you are trying to skip the Pina Colada song? The thing that really bothers me about the monthly fees to access the features of your car is that the features were built into the car already. Their functionality is just locked behind a paywall. You want to use those heated seats? That'll be $18 a month. If you buy a Ford, you can use their hands-free driving system for free, but only for 90 days, and then you have to activate it for $495 a year or $50 a month, or pay a one-time fee of $2,500 for life, but only at the time of purchase. What are we doing? You want access to weather? The Mercedes Me Connect includes live weather, traffic, and connected navigation, but that's gonna put you back $150 a year, while their acceleration increase costs $1,200 a year. Can you not live without the convenience of remote start? On a Toyota, that'll be $80 a year or $8 a month. Literally, when will blinkers and emergency brakes be paywalled? You could argue many of these features are not necessary and don't create a risk by not paying for them. But let's be honest, regardless of the regulatory bodies that enforce automakers to not turn their cars into complete death traps, corporations typically ask for forgiveness later and do the fucked up thing now. I don't trust them to not paywall safety features because it's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. Even if that never happens, the fact that these companies are including the technology in the car you bought and paid for, yet cannot access, speaks to just how fucked we are. And sure, some of these things do offer value that you gotta pay for. Cloud storage, traffic updates, roadside assistance, whatever. But let's not pretend any of that justifies charging people forever to access basic functionality that, again, is built into the goddamn car already. These are multi-billion-dollar companies. They can afford to make this stuff free. They just don't want to. These subscription models hit the people who actually need the service the hardest while turning it into a luxury for people who don't. It's not about whether the features are helpful or not. It's about who gets locked out and why. Subscription capitalism is just a poor tax by another name, a fresh new way to siphon money from the people most likely to benefit from access and funnel it into bonus checks and stock buybacks. That's not innovation, that's extraction. And honestly, what the fuck is next? Will I have to pay a monthly fee to turn my computer on? Will my pole saw have a SIM card that prevents me from charging it if I don't pay a $12 service fee? What about actual medical devices that exist in the real world now? Will some devious corporate goon try and slap a subscription model on their brand of pacemakers in the future? Will your titanium hip replacement cost $100 a month for real-time socket data? What's stopping them? Medical bankruptcy is the third leading cause of personal bankruptcy in the US, meaning this model essentially already exists. So installing a streaming brain implant isn't out of the realm of possibilities. At least until we figure out how to clone someone's gray matter. As much as this is about the ineffectiveness of satire to call this shit out, it's also about the phenomenon of enshittification, the gradual decline in the quality of a product or service as it prioritizes profit over user experience. We expect everything to get worse or harder to access as capitalism chews through us like a swarm of locusts that exclusively dine on our hard-earned dollars. Where satire has been used to call attention to or shame shameless companies into changing course, it can't do its job when these companies beat the critique to the punch. And look, I'm not saying don't do satire or that it doesn't have a place at all in artistic expression anymore. I just think we need to be aware of how short a turnaround there's going to be moving forward between a satirical take and absurdity becoming a reality. It's not even that satire is broken, it's that reality has broken us. And maybe things will go back to the way they were. Maybe we just have to accept our existence surrounded by soulless branded blockbuster movies and subscription model everything and be happy that we have anything at all and shut up and eat the slop like a good little pig. Or maybe satire has to push even further and instead of dismissing the next idiocracy out of hand, we embrace it and ride in the streets. That's the video. Thanks so much for sticking around. If you made it this far, that means you're special. Follow the rules of the channel, which are like, comment, share, subscribe. I guess you could ring the bell to be notified. I guess some people aren't getting my videos in their recommended. Don't know how to fix that besides tell you to ring the bell. Go follow me on Instagram as well. Thank you everybody who continues to come and subscribe and support the channel. It really means a lot to me. Thank you so much. Until next time, vanish. Man, get out of here. It's over.